Moscow, July 1980. The Summer Olympics open under a heavy atmosphere of geopolitical tension, but a far darker shadow falls over the capital. In a secluded resort room, a foreign tourist lies motionless on a rigid bed, his life quietly stolen in the dead of night. Beside the lifeless body, a tiny metallic container lies hidden among his personal belongings, holding a substance worth $500,000. This is osmium-187, a rare isotope of incredible power, capable of triggering a catastrophic international scandal if leaked to the public. The Soviet authorities immediately order absolute secrecy, forcing Militsiya investigators to solve the mystery before the Western press learns the truth. The investigation begins in the silent room at Sosnovaya Roshcha, where the cold air smells faintly of cheap sedatives and expensive foreign cologne. A silent investigator, wearing thick leather gloves, reaches down, slowly lifting the edge of a heavy woolen blanket on the bed. Underneath the mattress, his fingers brush against a small object, pulling out a dark leather wallet stamped with West German marks. With methodical precision, the investigator opens the leather wallet, revealing several crisp Soviet ruble bills and a Munich transit ticket. Every detail must be documented. A second detective picks up a heavy, steel-bodied Soviet camera, preparing to capture the tragic scene. The harsh flash illuminates the cold room for a fraction of a second, freezing the grim reality into a photographic record. The search moves to the wooden wardrobe. A gloved hand turns the heavy metal key, making the lock groan in the silence. Inside, the victim's pockets are thoroughly searched. A small, crumpled piece of paper is found deep inside a wool coat pocket. The receipt is carefully flattened under a magnifying glass, revealing the name of the exclusive hard currency Berezovka store in Moscow. It lists a purchase made just hours before his death, a pair of expensive gold earrings inlaid with bright blue turquoise, but the earrings are missing from the room. The investigator turns his attention to a small wastebasket lying in the corner. Using long steel tweezers, he gently lifts a discarded glass vial from the bottom of the trash bin, holding it to the light. A white powder clings to the inner glass. This is Clofeline, a powerful sedative that turns deadly when dissolved in alcohol. The investigator carefully places the vial into a transparent plastic evidence bag, sealing the fate of a hidden killer. The room has yielded its first secrets, but the identity of the woman who shared his last hours remains a mystery. Militsiya detectives travel to the luxurious Berezovka store, a rare haven of Western goods closed to the average Soviet citizen. Inside, expensive foreign perfumes, sparkling jewelry, and imported electronics line the glass counters under bright, unnatural lighting. The investigator approaches a stern-faced saleswoman, showing her a black and white photograph of the deceased German tourist. She studies the photograph with cold indifference, her memory slowly searching through the faces of wealthy foreign buyers. Suddenly she nods, remembering the jovial foreigner who spoke broken Russian and bought the expensive turquoise earrings. She remembers the woman who was with him, a young, striking Russian girl, dressed in bright, fashionable foreign clothing. The girl had bright, vibrant blue eyes that perfectly matched the turquoise stones of the newly purchased earrings. To an experienced Berezovka employee, her identity was obvious. She was a hard currency prostitute, a fixture of Moscow's shadow economy. Armed with this crucial lead, the Militsiya artists begin drafting a composite sketch of the mysterious blue-eyed woman. But in a city of millions, finding a nameless face in the shadow of the Olympics is a nearly impossible task. The newly drafted composite sketch of Maria Lunina is duplicated onto rough photographic paper under the red glow of a dark-room lamp. Dozens of these cold, black and white portraits are loaded into heavy leather briefcases, ready to be distributed across the secure city of Moscow. Investigator Kuleshov takes a stack of portraits, stepping out of the Militsiya station into the cold, damp morning air of the capital. His first stop is the towering Hotel National, where the elite, state-controlled prostitutes gather to meet wealthy foreign clients under Olympic watch. In the dimly lit lobby, Kuleshov shows the sketch to a veteran doorman, whose eyes narrow as he recognizes the familiar face. The doorman whispers a name: Masha, a girl who never works alone, always protected by a notorious black market dealer named Alyosha. Alyosha, Montana, a shadow figure known for trading high-end Western fashion, denim, and smuggled luxuries with wealthy tourists in Moscow. Kuleshov coordinates with the KGB to locate Alyosha's secret warehouse, suspected to be hidden in an old industrial sector. Under the cover of dusk, a team of silent Militsiya officers surrounds a rusting, padlocked iron door of an abandoned boiler house. With a sudden, violent strike, an officer breaks the heavy brass padlock using a steel crowbar, sending rust flying through the cold air. They storm inside, their bright flashlights cutting through the thick dust to reveal boxes of smuggled Western goods. Investigators tear open a wooden crate, revealing rolls of raw denim, imported records, and packets of high-grade Western cosmetics. Deep within the contraband pile, a small leather pouch is found containing a plastic container filled with dark, glittering metallic powder. The dark powder is identical to the substance found in the West German tourist's room at the resort. But Alyosha, Montana is nowhere to be found, having vanished into the sprawling black market network just hours before the raid. To trace the deadly osmium-187, investigators interrogate a corrupt laboratory technician arrested at a classified Soviet research institute. The technician sits in silence, his featureless white body trembling as Kuleshov drops a heavy cardboard folder onto the desk. Kuleshov speaks slowly, his voice flat and unyielding, presenting clear evidence of nuclear isotope theft from the state's inventory. The technician's hands twitch nervously, desperately trying to hide his fear as he stares down at the documented theft reports. He begins to break, confessing to stealing micrograms of osmium-187 over several months, smuggling it out inside hollowed-out pens. The stolen isotope was sold to a wealthy middleman from Kaunas, a man with massive underground financial resources named Albert Matulis. Matulis is a shadow millionaire, a Tsekovik, who owns illegal underground factories producing fashionable clothing across the Baltic region. But to secure his massive fortune, Matulis needed to convert his Soviet rubles into transportable assets that could cross borders. He bought smuggled jewelry, ancient religious icons, and even a stolen masterpiece painting by the legendary Ilya Repin. Yet his most ambitious plan involved using a foreign tourist to smuggle the highly valuable osmium-187 into Munich. Matulis hired Maria Lunina to find a suitable target, unaware that she was planning a betrayal of her own. Armed with the technician's confession, Militsiya units raid the luxury apartment of Albert Matulis in the center of Kaunas. The apartment is ransacked, but the millionaire is gone, leaving behind only the traces of a hurried, desperate escape. Under the Persian rug, detectives find a hidden floor compartment containing a loaded Soviet Makarov pistol and German transit documents. As the pieces of the conspiracy fall into place, the hunt for Maria Lunina and Alyosha, Montana becomes an urgent race against time. In the rain-slicked streets of Moscow, officers move silently under the shadow of concrete apartment blocks, searching for any sign of Maria Lunina. Every passerby is a potential lead, but the fear of the secret police keeps the city silent, masking the trail of the fugitive girl. Kuleshov arrives at a dilapidated communal apartment in Chertonovo, where informants claim the girl was hiding in the small, cluttered room last week. He kicks the door open, the wood splintering inward to reveal an empty room filled with dust and the scent of stale, cheap perfume. The investigator scans the floorboards, spotting a discarded red hair ribbon lying near a pile of forgotten, tattered Soviet-era fashion magazines. It is a small piece of evidence, but it confirms that Maria was here, likely moving toward the train station in a desperate flight. Meanwhile, Alyosha, Montana, is cornered in a smoke-filled underground bar near the outskirts, drinking heavily to drown his anxiety and looming inevitable capture. He clutches a photograph of Maria, his hands shaking, as he realizes that she has betrayed him to the police for her own escape. The bar door crashes open, and flashlight beams sweep through the haze, blinding everyone as the Militsiya unit moves in for the final arrest. Alyosha doesn't resist. He drops his glass, watching the dark liquid pool on the dirty bar floor as steel handcuffs click around his cold wrists. Dragged into the interrogation room, Alyosha is thrown into the chair, his defiance crumbling as Kuleshov begins the grueling process of forcing a confession. The room is thick with silence, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent light and the sound of Kuleshov's heavy pen on paper. Alyosha begins to speak, his voice rasping as he details the night of the murder, blaming Maria for forcing his hand in the crime. He claims that Maria had spiked the sedative dose, intending to kill the German tourist without leaving any witnesses for the planned robbery. The confession is recorded, every word typed into the official file that will ensure both Alyosha and Maria face the final judgment of court. With Alyosha in custody, the Militsiya turns its full investigative focus toward finding Maria Lunina, now fleeing toward the southern border alone. She arrives at a quiet, rural train station in the middle of the night, her eyes scanning the dark platform for hidden surveillance agents. Every footstep she takes echoes on the wooden platform, making her heart race as she clutches her handbag, holding the stolen painting's secrets. She had planned to meet a fence, an elderly man in a nearby village, but the station is eerily empty, a trap waiting to be sprung. From the darkness of the waiting room, a shadow emerges, a Militsiya officer, his silhouette cutting through the dim lamplight, signaling the end. Maria freezes, her hand reaching for her bag, but she realizes there is no escape. The station is completely surrounded by uniformed officers. She is ordered to put her hands up, her movements slow and mechanical, as the heavy weight of her crimes crashes down upon her. Kuleshov steps out from behind the officer, his face unreadable as he approaches the trembling woman to conduct the final, fateful arrest. He grabs her handbag, opening it to find the rolled-up canvas of the stolen Repin painting, the reason for all the blood and betrayal. Maria is led to a waiting Militsiya van, the cold metal doors slamming shut, echoing through the empty, damp night air of the rural station. Back at the investigation center, Maria is interrogated under the harsh glare of the ceiling lights, her defiance replaced by a haunting, silent grief. She confesses to everything: the plot, the murder, the stolen metal, and the betrayal of everyone who once trusted her for a better life. As her story unfolds, Kuleshov records the tragic trajectory of a girl who fell from a simple, humble home into the abyss of greed. The investigation, initiated under the pressure of the Olympic Games, reaches its conclusion as the files are sealed and sent to the high courts. Justice may be served, but the cost was high, leaving behind a trail of ruined lives, cold secrets, and memories that will never truly fade. In the quiet of the interrogation room, Kuleshov compares Maria's soft, weeping voice with the cold, hard statements written in Alyosha's confession file. The timeline does not fit. Alyosha claims he was not at the resort, yet a bus ticket from Moscow was found in his pocket. To resolve the lies, Kuleshov orders a secondary, highly detailed search of Maria's abandoned communal bedroom near the old city center. Two young officers return to the dark, dusty room, their leather boots stepping carefully over the creaking, warped wooden floorboards. One detective kneels down by the small iron radiator, using a thin wire tool to probe the narrow, dark gap behind it. The metal tool strikes something solid, making a sharp clinking sound that echoes softly in the empty, silent room. He carefully pulls out a tiny, sealed brown glass medicine bottle, its label showing vintage Cyrillic letters and a skull symbol. This is pure, concentrated liquid sedative, far more lethal than the diluted powder found at the initial resort crime scene. The discovery proves Maria possessed the lethal substance long before meeting the German tourist, indicating premeditation rather than a sudden accident. The search continues under the wooden bed. The second officer uses his heavy metal flashlight to peer into the dark, dusty corners. His gloved hand reaches deep under the dust, pulling out a small, tattered red leather notebook hidden near the wall. Opening the diary, investigators find handwritten lists of foreign names, hotel room numbers, and dates stretching back to 1978. It is a meticulous record of Maria's work, but several pages from the July 1980 section have been violently torn out. Who tore these pages? Did Maria destroy them to protect someone? Or did Alyosha sanitize the diary before fleeing the apartment? The tension rises as the lab analysis reveals that the ink on the torn edges belongs to a standard Soviet-issue ballpoint pen. Kuleshov returns to Alyosha's cell, slamming the newly recovered red diary onto the metal table to break his stubborn silence. Alyosha stares at the book, his featureless white body stiffening as he recognizes the record of their highly lucrative criminal partnership. Under intense questioning, Alyosha finally admits that he managed a larger network of girls working the major tourist hotels in Moscow. He reveals that they targeted wealthy Westerners, using sedatives to put them to sleep before stripping their rooms of hard currency. But the German tourist, Dietrich Weil, was different. He had been personally selected by the underground Lithuanian millionaire, Albert Matulis. Matulis wanted Weil to carry the highly dangerous osmium-187 out of the Soviet Union, disguised as a rare chemical sample. To secure Weil's cooperation, Matulis instructed Maria to use her beauty, promising her a massive cut of the final Western payout. But Alyosha, driven by jealousy and greed, convinced Maria to double-cross the Lithuanian millionaire and steal the valuable isotope for themselves. Their plan was to drug Weil at the resort, take the osmium-187, and sell it to a black market contact in Riga. However, they did not anticipate the lethal strength of the sedative, which caused the tourist's heart to fail almost immediately. Panicked by the corpse, Maria fled with the stolen Repin painting and the jewelry, leaving the priceless metal container behind in terror. Alyosha's confession lays bare the complete web of greed, but one crucial mystery remains: the location of the stolen Repin masterpiece. The painting, valued at hundreds of thousands of dollars, is the key to proving the direct link between Matulis and the homicide. Kuleshov presses Alyosha for the name of their local fence, the man who was supposed to clean the stolen artwork in Moscow. With a trembling voice, Alyosha whispers the name of Pashutin, a wealthy, highly respected Moscow antique dealer with a dark, double life. Investigator Kuleshov carefully writes down the address of Pashutin's antique shop on a small, yellowed piece of notepad paper. He drives through the dark, fog-covered streets of Moscow, his eyes fixed on the rain-slicked road ahead. As midnight approaches, he pulls over in front of a dark, elegant storefront with an intricately carved wooden sign reading "Antiques" in Russian. But the heavy wooden door is already sealed with official government tape, indicating another branch of state security has arrived first. Kuleshov steps closer, his gloved hand touching the torn paper seal, a cold feeling of dread settling deep within his chest. An officer from the local precinct approaches, holding a grim report detailing a fatal car crash that occurred earlier that night. Pashutin is dead. His black Volga plunged off a bridge into the freezing water of the Yauza River, silencing him forever. The vehicle's brakes had failed completely. Investigators at the scene suspect the steel hydraulic brake lines had been deliberately sabotaged, a professional hit, designed to eliminate the fence before he could reveal the location of the priceless, stolen Ilya Repin masterpiece. Kuleshov examines Pashutin's personal effects recovered from the wreckage, finding a damp leather briefcase containing several high-contrast photographic negatives. Holding a plastic film sheet to the bare desk lamp, he reveals the distinct, majestic silhouette of the stolen Repin painting. The photograph shows the painting without its original wooden frame, confirming it had been removed and prepared for illegal export. A second document inside the briefcase lists a secret meeting location at a private dacha outside the Moscow Ring Road. Pashutin was scheduled to deliver the painting to a wealthy foreign buyer tonight, but his death canceled the illegal transaction. Kuleshov realizes the killer must be heading to the dacha to retrieve the hidden painting before the Militsiya can secure the area. 3 unmarked Militsiya patrol cars speed through the dark, snowy forests outside Moscow, their headlights piercing the thick winter fog. They approach a secluded, 2-story wooden dacha, hidden deep inside a dense grove of pine trees under the freezing night air. Kuleshov signals the officers to fan out, their silhouettes moving quietly through the deep, crunching white snow toward the side windows. One officer kneels under a low wooden window, using a thin knife blade to carefully slide the iron lock open. With a soft click, the window swings open, letting a blast of freezing winter air into the dark, silent house. Kuleshov climbs through the open window, his heavy leather boots stepping onto the dust-covered wooden floor with extreme caution. The interior is cold and silent, the furniture covered in large white linen sheets that resemble frozen, faceless ghosts in the dark. He moves toward the fireplace, spotting a fresh, dark footprint left in the thin layer of gray ash on the stone hearth. Beside the fireplace, a secret door built into the dark oak wooden paneling is slightly ajar, revealing a narrow staircase descending. With his hand resting on his service weapon, Kuleshov descends into the damp, concrete-walled basement, his flashlight cutting through the heavy gloom. At the bottom, his light falls upon a small wooden workbench, covered in rusty tools, old paint cans, and solvents. Under a stack of rough, tattered canvas sacks, his gloved hands find a long, tightly rolled-up cylinder wrapped in thick plastic. He carefully cuts through the heavy plastic using a pocket knife, slowly revealing the antique, age-cracked oil paint of the stolen Repin. It is Ilya Repin's Posledu. The masterpiece has been secured, but the shadow of its deadly journey is far from over. Suddenly, a loud, heavy creak echoes from the floorboards directly above, indicating they are no longer alone in the dark house. Kuleshov freezes, slowly extinguishes his flashlight, and draws his service pistol, gesturing for the officers to cover the basement exit. With silent footsteps, they ascend the narrow stone staircase, their eyes scanning the dark cracks of the wooden floor above. As his head clears of the floor level, Kuleshov peers into the vast, shadow-draped living room, listening to the heavy wind outside. A floorboard creaks again near the front door, followed by the faint rustle of thick winter clothing moving through the darkness. Kuleshov spots a dark, tall silhouette slipping out through the broken kitchen window, escaping into the freezing, snow-covered forest outside. The investigator leaps through the window in hot pursuit, his boots sinking deep into the freezing, crisp snow as he runs. Pine branches slap against his heavy wool trench coat, showering him with cold white frost as he pursues the escaping shadow. The fugitive runs desperately, his heavy breath forming thick white clouds of steam in the sub-zero night air of the forest. Kuleshov fires a warning shot into the dark sky, the loud report echoing sharply through the silent, snow-laden pine forest. The bullet cuts through the cold air, striking a frozen pine branch overhead and sending a heavy shower of snow downward. Startled by the gunfire, the fugitive trips over a hidden tree root, falling violently into a deep, freezing snowdrift. Before he can recover, Kuleshov lunges forward, pinning the struggling suspect face down into the freezing white forest floor. The suspect struggles uselessly against the investigator's heavy weight, his featureless white limbs thrashing wildly in the deep snow. Kuleshov swiftly pulls a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his pocket, locking the cold metal firmly around the suspect's wrists. He rolls the captive over, searching his wet wool coat pockets and pulling out a heavy black metal silenced pistol. Next to the weapon, Kuleshov finds a small, heavy lead capsule identical to the nuclear transport containers used by state laboratories. This is a second container of osmium-187, proving the conspiracy's scope goes far deeper than a single theft from the Kaunas Institute. 2 Militsiya officers arrive through the trees, lifting the bound suspect and dragging him back toward the waiting patrol cars. Kuleshov follows them, holding the recovered isotope and the silenced weapon, his mind racing with the dark implications of the find. They load the suspect into the dark Volga sedan, the doors slamming shut as the engines roar back to life. Back inside the cold, green-walled interrogation room, the captured suspect sits bound, his wet coat dripping water onto the floor. A slow puddle of melting snow and dark, murky water forms around his boots, reflecting the flickering fluorescent light above. Kuleshov drops the silenced pistol and the lead container onto the wooden desk, the heavy thud echoing in the sterile room. The suspect remains stubbornly silent, his featureless white head tilted down, as if refusing to acknowledge the physical evidence before him. Kuleshov sits down opposite him, leaning forward until his shadow completely envelops the bound man under the desk lamp. With a cold, measured voice, the investigator reveals that Pashutin's car was deliberately sabotaged, and the killer is now trapped. The suspect's shoulder twitches slightly, a subtle physical reaction that betrays his inner shock at the news of Pashutin's violent death. He finally breaks his silence, his voice a low, raspy whisper as he names the mastermind behind the targeted hit. He confesses to being an enforcer for Albert Matulis, ordered to clean the trail by eliminating the antique dealer and recovering the isotope. With this confession, the final link in the chain is forged, pointing directly to the high-level corruption threatening the entire Soviet state. With the enforcer's written confession in hand, Kuleshov mobilizes a heavy tactical unit, heading straight for Albert Matulis's primary residence in Kaunas. The tactical truck stops silently along the perimeter of a massive stone estate, their engines cut to maintain absolute surprise. Armed officers clad in heavy winter uniforms jump from the flatbeds, moving quickly to surround the dark, silent mansion. Kuleshov coordinates the entry teams with quiet hand signals, pointing toward the heavy wooden double doors of the main entrance. With a sudden explosive force, 2 officers use a heavy steel battering ram to smash through the lock, splinters of wood flying inside. The tactical team storms into the dark foyer, their flashlights sweeping across the luxurious imported Western furniture and silk wallpaper. Kuleshov heads straight for Matulis's private study, finding a massive oak desk covered in scattered papers and half-burned documents in the hearth. He kneels by the fireplace, using steel tongs to retrieve a half-burned paper ledger containing columns of figures and Western bank names. The charred paper is placed on the desk. Kuleshov traces the remaining text, revealing overseas transaction routes linked to Zurich and Munich. An officer inspecting the bookshelf pulls a heavy leather-bound volume, triggering a hidden mechanism that causes the wall panel to slide open. Behind the bookshelf lies a heavy, dark green steel safe, built directly into the concrete wall of the secret alcove. Kuleshov uses a stethoscope against the safe door, listening carefully as he rotates the heavy combination dial with steady, patient precision. The lock clicks open. He swings the heavy steel door aside, revealing rows of wooden trays filled with sparkling smuggled treasures. At the bottom of the safe sits an empty velvet-lined slot, exactly matching the dimensions of the recovered lead osmium containers. Matulis's secret vault has been breached, but the millionaire has already fled Lithuanian territory, leaving behind his vast illegal empire. The search of the estate expands into the cellar, where rows of expensive, imported vintage wines are stored on dusty iron racks. Kuleshov taps on the damp concrete floorboards with his steel-tipped cane, listening for hollow sounds that indicate a hidden basement compartment. A dull, hollow reverberation echoes near the back wall. 2 officers immediately bring heavy steel shovels to dig through the dirt. The steel blades strike metal, They clear away the dark soil to reveal the bolted iron lid of a buried storage chest. Using a heavy bolt cutter, Kuleshov snaps the rusted padlock, sending oxidized metal flakes falling onto the wet ground. He flings the heavy lid back, revealing dozens of wrapped antique religious icons stolen from state museums across the Soviet Union. These priceless artifacts were intended to be smuggled to Western buyers, used as currency to establish Matulis's foreign bank accounts. Each icon is documented and cataloged. An officer photographs the contents of the chest using a heavy vintage professional camera. The blinding camera flash illuminates the dark cellar, capturing the physical evidence of the massive, high-level underground art trafficking network. But deep under the icons, Kuleshov finds a small, heavy cardboard box wrapped in official Ministry of Culture seal tape. Inside the box lies a thick stack of transit permits, forged identity passports, and plane tickets to West Germany. The forged passports show Matulis's photograph under a false German name, indicating his escape plan had been prepared months in advance. The plane tickets are dated for tomorrow morning, proving that the Militsiya has missed the mastermind by a matter of mere hours. Matulis is already gone, fleeing through the porous Baltic borders toward Western Europe, leaving behind his ruined, exposed wealth. The investigation has exposed the shadow millionaires of the Soviet state, but the cost has been written in blood and betrayal. Back at the office, Kuleshov places the forged German passports beside the charred ledger, seeking the connection that led to Matulis's sudden escape. The dates on the transit permits align perfectly with the torn-out pages of the red notebook found in Maria's apartment. To find where Matulis hid his final reserve of osmium-187, Kuleshov orders a forensic team to analyze the fireplace ash. Under the heavy lens of a laboratory microscope, a technician isolates a tiny, glistening dark grain mixed with the wood soot. It is chemical proof that a third, massive container of the rare isotope was destroyed or moved from the study fireplace. A telephone on the desk rings loudly, the sharp, cold bell echoing in the quiet room to deliver urgent news from Kaunas. Kuleshov picks up the receiver, listening in absolute silence as a raspy voice reports a grim discovery near the Baltic border. Albert Matulis has been found dead inside a locked hotel room in Vilnius, his grand escape stopped by an unseen hand. There are no signs of a physical struggle, but a half-empty glass of foreign brandy sits on the nightstand beside him. The poison was Clofeline, administered in a lethal dosage identical to the substance that ended the German tourist's life at the resort. The master of the conspiracy was eliminated by his own network, silenced to prevent the exposure of his high-level political protectors. In his coat pocket, Vilnius detectives recover a crumpled paper note containing a single, chilling instruction written in dark ink. The trail is closed. The shadow millionaires are being systematically purged as the Soviet government seeks to protect its national secrets. Kuleshov writes his final report, knowing the complete truth will be buried deep within the secure, classified archives of the state. The files are gathered, ready to be locked away, far from the eyes of the public and the Western media. With all major targets neutralized or dead, the Militsiya prepares to process the final sentencing files for Maria and Alyosha. Maria Lunina is brought before a closed Soviet military tribunal, her blank white face lowered in silent, total submission to the state. The military judge reads the harsh verdict, his voice echoing coldly through the sterile, high-ceilinged courtroom under the Soviet emblem. She is sentenced to 15 years of hard labor in a high-security penal colony. Her dreams of a luxurious Western life shattered. Beside her, Alyosha Montana stands rigid, his head bowed as he receives a sentence of 12 years in the northern mines. The guards step forward, clicking heavy steel chains around their ankles as they prepare to transport them to the transit trains. They are led out through a heavy iron door, stepping into the damp, cold courtyard, where a prison van waits in the fog. The heavy iron door of the prison van slams shut, the loud clanging sound echoing through the sterile stone walls of the courtyard. The truck drives away into the dense fog, leaving behind the capital and the dying echoes of the high-stakes Olympic scandal. Back in Moscow, the closing ceremony of the 1980 Olympics begins, a grand spectacle designed to project absolute harmony to the world. The giant mascot bear floats into the dark night sky, a symbol of hope and peace masking the dark crimes buried underneath. The stadium lights slowly fade, leaving the streets of Moscow silent, cold, and empty under the damp summer rain. Kuleshov stands alone by the window of his office, watching the rain wash away the chalk outlines of a forgotten era. He turns back to the dark room, his silhouette merging with the shadows of the desk and the silent, cold typewriter. The case file is closed, the secrets are sealed, and the silent, heavy winter of Soviet memory claims another dark story.